They say revenge is a dish best served cold. For me, Elijah Vance, it was a dish simmering for decades, a low, burning ember beneath the polished surface of Vance's valuables. I'd spent 65 years observing, learning, and playing the long game, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the call that ignited that ember into a raging inferno. The call that told me my granddaughter, my Imani, the light of my life, had been accused of a crime she couldn't possibly commit. They messed with the wrong family, and they were about to learn that even a pawnbroker, an old man behind a counter, could still be the most dangerous player on the board. If you've ever felt the sting of injustice or the burning desire to see wrongs made right, then you're going to want to hear this story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and join me as I recount the most harrowing, calculated game of my life, the one I played to bring down an empire and clear my granddaughter's name. Life in the Bottom, my neighborhood, has always been a symphony of resilience. The scent of Mama Rose's collard greens mingling with the bass from passing cars, the rhythmic buzz of Mr. Henderson's clippers from the barbershop, the laughter of children chasing pigeons in the square. It's a place carved from struggle but built on spirit. And for 65 years, I, Elijah Vance, had been a part of its heartbeat. My pawn shop, Vance's Valuables, wasn't just a business. It was a confessional, a community hub, a living archive of 1,000 stories. Every item held a whisper of its past, and I, the keeper of those whispers, had learned to listen. My days were a comfortable rhythm, unlocking the shop, polishing the glass, settling into my worn leather chair, and greeting the parade of faces that passed through my door. A half smile was my permanent expression, a testament to a life lived, lessons learned, and a quiet contentment. But beneath that smile, my eyes, honed by years as a detective, missed nothing. The world might have seen an old pawnbroker, but I was still, and always would be, a watcher. My North Star, my reason for breathing, was Imani. At 22, she was a force of nature, her spirit as vibrant as the canvases she brought to life. She saw the beauty in the bottom, the raw, untamed soul of our people, and she poured it onto canvas with a ferocity that took my breath away. Her studio apartment, cluttered with tubes of paint and half-finished masterpieces, smelled of linseed oil and possibility. I'd given her a small space in the back of my shop, a little nook where she'd often set up an easel, sketching the flow of life outside the window. One of her pieces, a striking portrait of Ella Fitzgerald, rendered in bold, sweeping strokes of blues and golds, hung proudly on the wall behind my counter. Customers would often stop, captivated, and I'd beam, a quiet pride swelling in my chest. "That's my granddaughter," I'd say, my voice thick with affection. "She's going places, that girl." Our evenings were sacred. She'd often come by after her classes, or after spending hours lost in her art, and we'd share a pot of Mama Rose's strong coffee, sometimes play a game of chess. She wasn't bad, that girl, always trying new strategies, thinking several moves ahead. She reminded me of myself, a younger, more vibrant version. We'd talk about her art, my old detective cases, the ever-changing tapestry of the neighborhood. Those moments, quiet and unassuming, were the bedrock of my world. They were my peace. Then came the August afternoon that shattered everything. The heat was stifling, even for the bottom in summer, a thick, humid blanket that clung to your skin. The bell above the door chimed, a sound usually associated with the promise of a sale, a new story. But it wasn't a customer. It was Detective Harding, a young officer I'd mentored years ago, a good kid with a strong moral compass. He stood in the doorway, framed by the shimmering heat, and the usual confident swagger of a police officer was gone, replaced by a grim pallor. "Eli, it's Imani." The words were a physical blow, a sudden sharp pain that stole the air from my lungs. The pawn shop, usually a place of warm familiarity, suddenly felt cold, alien. My hands, usually steady, trembled as I gripped the counter. "What about Imani, Harding?" My voice was rough, a stranger's voice. He took a deep breath, his gaze meeting mine. full of a sorrow that mirrored my own. She's been arrested, Eli. Grand larceny. Aggravated assault. They're saying it was an art gallery heist. The world tilted. Grand larceny. Aggravated assault. Imani, the gentle soul who spent her days painting canvases, sketching in coffee shops, whose biggest crime was leaving her art supplies scattered across my living room floor. It was unthinkable, implausible, a cruel, twisted joke. No, I whispered, the word a raw, guttural sound. That's not possible. Harding explained the bare facts, each word a fresh wound. A gallery downtown, owned by a Marcus Thorne. A security guard found beaten, unconscious. A priceless sculpture, a high-value piece of African art, gone. And Imani found with the sculpture in her apartment. No bail. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the nonsensical. Imani, a thief? Imani, a violent assailant? The image of her, paintbrush in hand, laughing as she mixed colors, flashed before my eyes. No, absolutely not. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate fabrication, a meticulous lie. I visited her that evening, the sterile fluorescent lights of the precinct cutting through the haze of my shock. Seeing her behind that plexiglass, her face tear-streaked, her eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen there before, tore me apart. My heart physically ached, a deep bruising pain that settled in my chest. Grandpa, I swear I didn't do it. Her voice was a fragile whisper, laced with desperation. I was at the coffee shop sketching. Then I came home. They found the sculpture in my apartment. It was planted. You have to believe me. I believed her. With every fiber of my being, I believed her. The certainty was cold, hard, settling deep in my gut. This wasn't some random act of fate. This was calculated. This was a setup. But by whom? And why target my Imani? The questions swirled, a bitter storm in my mind. Back in the shop, the familiar surroundings offered no comfort. The shelves of forgotten treasures, usually a source of quiet contemplation, now felt mocking. I retreated to my small back office, a sanctuary normally filled with the comforting scent of old books and the quiet click of a chess piece. Tonight, it felt like a tomb. I sank into my chair, the worn leather creaking in protest, and stared at the dusty, leather-bound journal I'd pulled from the bottom drawer of my desk. My personal archive, my ghosts. I flipped through the brittle pages, past solved cases, past the faces of perpetrators brought to justice, until I reached a section marked, in my own neat hand, The Serpent. The name itself sent a shiver down my spine. The Serpent, my white whale. A criminal organization that had plagued the bottom for decades, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the community, dealing in everything from drugs to illicit art. They were a shadow, always there, always elusive, slithering away just before I could land a decisive blow. I'd gotten close once back in my detective days, years ago, almost apprehending their elusive leader, known only as the Collector. But the operation had been mysteriously sabotaged, the evidence vanishing, my leads drying up overnight. It was one of the few cases I'd never closed, a bitter taste that lingered even after I'd retired. Now, looking at Imani's shattered face in my mind's eye, a chilling realization dawned. Her arrest wasn't just a random act. It had the Collector's fingerprints all over it. The gallery where the heist supposedly happened? Marcus Thorne's gallery. Thorne was a known front for the Syndicate, his business empire built on the back of their illicit dealings. And the missing sculpture? A high-value piece of African art, the Collector's known obsession. I stared at the chessboard on my desk, the familiar black and white squares blurring before my eyes. This wasn't just a game of pawns and kings anymore. This was a game with higher stakes, with my granddaughter's freedom, her future, on the line. I wasn't just a pawnbroker. I was Eli Vance, master strategist. I had played thousands of games, seen moves 5 steps ahead. Now, I had to play the most important game of my life. And I had to win. My first move, intelligence. I needed to understand the board, identify the players, and uncover the serpent's latest scheme. I started subtly, a ghost in my own community. A casual chat with Mama Rose at the diner, her keen ears always tuned to the whispers of the neighborhood. "Mama Rose, you hear anything about that Thorn fella? Seems a little flashy for these parts." Her eyes, sharp even behind her spectacles, would narrow. "Flashy indeed, Eli. And too quiet for a man with so much going on." She'd drop a subtle hint about new money flowing into the area, new properties changing hands at lightning speed. Then to the barber shop, where news flowed like the Clippers, a constant hum of gossip and speculation. Mr. Henderson, Clippers buzzing, would always have a word or two. "Heard Thorne's buying up old warehouses out by the docks," he'd say. "Talk of turning 'em into something fancy, but ain't nobody seen no plans." Old contacts were reactivated. A retired beat cop who now worked security at the community center, a former informant who still owed Eli a favor from a lifetime ago. They filled in the gaps, piece by agonizing piece. The gallery owner, Marcus Thorne, was indeed consolidating properties, eyeing the historically significant buildings in the bottom. And the warehouse, the dilapidated one on the edge of the neighborhood, the one the Syndicate had long used for illicit dealings, was now firmly under his control. One evening, under the cloak of twilight, I drove my old beat-up sedan, its engine purring a familiar tune, past the warehouse. It was an imposing, decaying brick structure, its windows boarded, its walls whispering tales of forgotten industry. But from a second-story window, a faint, almost imperceptible light pulsed, a single defiant heartbeat in the gloom. I parked a block away, in the deep shadows of an abandoned lot, and watched. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant wail of a siren and the rustle of leaves. My mind churned, a complex algorithm of suspicion and deduction. This wasn't just a warehouse, it was a nest. The next day I made a call. "Ghost," I said, my voice low. "I need a look inside that warehouse tonight." Ghost was a quiet, unassuming man, a legend in the underworld of the bottom, a phantom who could disable any alarm system with the precision of a surgeon, leaving no trace. He owed me deeply, and he was loyal. He simply replied, "Location and time, Eli. I'll be there." That night the air was cooler, a slight breeze rustling through the neglected streets. I met Ghost near the warehouse, a shadow among shadows. He was a man of few words, his movements economical, fluid. He worked silently, his nimble fingers dancing over the rusty lock and crude alarm box on a side door. Within minutes, a soft click, a faint whir, and the door creaked open, revealing a cavernous maw of darkness. The air inside was thick with dust, the smell of aged wood, and a faint, acrid scent of chemicals, cleaning solvents perhaps, or something more sinister. My flashlight beam, a focused spear of light, cut through the gloom, revealing a breathtaking sight. Not a warehouse, but a hidden vault. Crates, canvases, sculptures, art pieces of every description. Some clearly legitimate, others suspiciously familiar from news reports of unsolved art thefts, whispers that had faded into the background noise of the city. My heart pounded a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. And then I saw it. The distinctive, abstract sculpture Imani was accused of stealing, nestled in a corner, bathed in the anemic glow of my flashlight. A surge of fury, cold and sharp, washed over me. They had framed her. But something else caught my eye, a detail that sent a jolt through me, a spark that ignited a new path in the labyrinth of my investigation. Tucked away in a crate marked Personal Collection MT was a small, intricately carved wooden mask. It was unique, unmistakable. I knew that mask. It was part of a set, stolen from the local community center years ago, a theft that had devastated the neighborhood, leaving a gaping wound that had never truly healed. The center, a beacon of hope and support, had been struggling ever since. This mask was proof, undeniable proof, linking Marcus Thorne, the gallery owner, directly to the serpent's long, insidious history of exploitation in the bottom. I worked quickly, methodically. I carefully photographed the sculpture and the mask with a disposable camera I'd bought specifically for this task, a relic from my detective days, untraceable in the age of digital footprints. As I zoomed in on the sculpture, my flashlight beam catching the intricate details, I noticed something else. Something subtle, almost invisible. A small, almost imperceptible serial number scratched into the bottom of the base. It wasn't present in the police photos. A cold clarity washed over me. The planted sculpture was a forgery, a crude copy. They had framed Imani with a fake, then switched it out with the real one later, betting no one would notice the discrepancy, banking on the chaos of the arrest to obscure their tracks. The audacity, the sheer calculating evil of it. The pieces were beginning to fit, forming a mosaic of betrayal and greed. Imani's art, her vibrant depictions of our community, was gaining recognition, attracting positive attention to the bottom. Attention Thorne and the collector didn't want. They were gentrifying the area by stealth, driving out businesses, acquiring properties on the cheap, pushing out the very soul of the neighborhood. Imani's arrest wasn't just about the sculpture. It was meant to discredit her, to silence her, to send a chilling message to anyone who dared to stand in their way. They wanted to strip the bottom of its identity, turn it into another soulless urban playground for the wealthy. And Imani, with her defiant brushstrokes, was a threat to their carefully laid plans. I knew I couldn't go to the police yet. Thorne was too powerful, too connected, his tendrils reaching deep into the city's institutions. My word, the word of an old pawnbroker, against his? It wouldn't be enough. I needed more. I needed the collector. I needed to unmask the snake at the head of the serpent to expose the man pulling the strings. And for that, I had a plan. A dangerous, audacious, all-or-nothing plan. The weight of it all pressed down on me in the days that followed, a suffocating blanket of anxiety and frustration. Imani was still in jail, her vibrant spirit slowly being chipped away by the harsh reality of her confinement. Each visit was a fresh agony, seeing the light dim in her eyes, hearing the tremor in her voice as she reaffirmed her innocence, her confusion growing with every passing day. The public perception, fueled by carefully leaked half-truths and insidious whispers, was turning against her. The local news painted her as a reckless, violent criminal, a betrayal of the community she so fiercely loved. My heart ached for her, for the injustice that was slowly consuming her. The nights were long, sleep a fleeting stranger. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the faces of Imani, Thorne, and the collector swirling in a terrifying vortex in my mind. The bitterness of my past failures, the taste of that sabotaged operation against the serpent, felt fresh, raw. I couldn't fail Imani. I wouldn't. The legal battle was an uphill climb, a bureaucratic nightmare designed to crush hope. Imani's public defender, a young, overwhelmed woman fresh out of law school, was doing her best, but she was outmatched, out-resourced. Thorne's legal team was a phalanx of expensive, ruthless lawyers, their arguments polished, their lies seamlessly woven into a fabric of plausible deniability. They attacked Imani's character, twisted her artistic passion into a motive for theft, and presented the evidence with an air of unshakable authority. The planted sculpture, now safely in police evidence, was the smoking gun. The real sculpture, with its barely visible serial number, was hidden, inaccessible. I felt like I was screaming into a void, my protests unheard, my truth dismissed. I had tried to present my findings to Harding, the photos of the fake sculpture, the mask from the community center. He listened, his brow furrowed with concern, but his hands were tied. "Eli," he'd said, his voice laced with regret. "It's compelling, but it's circumstantial. And frankly, the chain of custody for your evidence, it's not admissible." Thorne's lawyers would tear it apart. We need more. Something ironclad. Something that links Thorne directly, undeniably, to the real theft and to the Syndicate. His words were a splash of cold water, a painful reminder of the rigid rules of the game I'd once played, rules that now felt like shackles. The anger simmered beneath my calm exterior, a constant low roar. Thorne was not just attacking Imani, he was attacking the soul of the bottom. His gentrification efforts were thinly veiled predation, his art gallery a facade for a deeper, more insidious agenda. Businesses, long-standing pillars of the community, were being squeezed out, their leases mysteriously terminated, their properties bought up by shell corporations linked to Thorne. Mama Rose's diner, Mr. Henderson's barbershop, even my own pawn shop. We were all targets, remnants of a past they wanted to erase. The community was gripped by a quiet fear, a sense of powerlessness. Thorne's reach felt boundless, his power untouchable. I remembered a recurring detail from my old files, a small, almost insignificant detail that had always nagged at me. A specific, ornate gold leaf frame. It was distinctive, almost ostentatious, always used for the collector's most prized acquisitions. It was his signature, a subtle boast hidden in plain sight. It was a long shot, a needle in a haystack, but it was all I had. If the collector had the real sculpture, he'd want to display it, to gloat, to add it to his private collection, and he'd frame it in his distinctive style. My routine shifted. The pawn shop still opened its doors, but my mind was elsewhere, constantly sifting, analyzing. I started visiting high-end galleries and exclusive auction houses in the city's wealthier districts, places I'd never had reason to frequent before. I adopted a persona, a new mask to wear. Elijah Vance, eccentric, discerning collector, with a particular interest in investment art. I dressed a little sharper, spoke with a subtle gravitas, and feigned a casual disdain for anything less than extraordinary. It felt like stepping onto a stage, playing a role, but the stakes were too high for me to falter. Days bled into a week. Each gallery was a labyrinth of hushed tones, polished surfaces, and astronomical price tags. I examined frames, my eyes meticulously scanning for that specific gold leaf, my heart leaping with false hope at every ornate design, only to sink again as I realized it wasn't the frame. The frustration was a slow burn, eating away at my patience. I felt like a ghost, haunting these opulent spaces, searching for a phantom. My feet ached, my eyes grew weary, and doubt, an insidious serpent, began to coil around my resolve. Was I chasing a fantasy? Had the collector changed his habits? Was Imani truly lost? I walked the streets of the bottom, seeing the subtle shifts, the empty storefronts, the for sale signs proliferating like a cancerous growth. Imani's mural, a vibrant ode to our community, now felt like a defiant scream against the encroaching silence. The fear in the eyes of my neighbors, the hushed conversations, the sense of hopelessness. It all fueled my resolve, pushing back against the creeping despair. I had to find the collector. I had to bring him down. Then finally, after days of fruitless searching, I found it. In a secluded, appointment-only gallery across town, a place that reeked of old money and illicit dealings, I saw it. A newly acquired, stunning Edo bronze head, its ancient beauty radiating an almost spiritual power. And there, encircling it, was the frame. The ornate gold leaf, unmistakable, gleaming under the carefully directed spotlights. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. I had found his lair. The gallery owner, a slick man named Julian Finch, emerged from the shadows, his smile a practiced, predatory display of charm. Finch. The name resonated. He was known in certain circles, a whispered reputation as a fence for high-value stolen art, a man who moved in the shadows, connecting the underworld with the elite. He was younger than the grainy photo in my journal, but the eyes, cold and calculating, were the same. Julian Finch was the collector. I schooled my features, maintaining the mask of the eccentric connoisseur. My voice, when I spoke, was a smooth purr. Magnificent, I murmured, feigning disinterest in the Ado head. Truly a marvel. But I'm searching for something more personal. Something with a history. Perhaps from a certain private collection I've heard whispers about. I let my gaze linger on the frame, a subtle message in my unspoken words. A certain taste for African art, if you understand my meaning. Finch's smile didn't waver, but his eyes, those cold, intelligent eyes, narrowed almost imperceptibly. A flicker of suspicion quickly replaced by a knowing smirk. He recognized the code, the subtle language of the illicit art world. He saw a kindred spirit, or perhaps a new mark. "Come back tomorrow, Mr. Vance," Finch said, his voice smooth as silk, a predator inviting prey into his den. "I might have something that truly piques your interest. Something exceptional." A chill snaked down my spine despite the heat of the gallery. I knew I was walking into a trap. I was bait, dangling myself before the serpent's jaws. But this was my best, perhaps my only, shot at confronting the collector, at unmasking him, at gathering the undeniable proof I needed. Fear mingled with a surge of exhilaration. The game was escalating, and I was ready to play. That night, I didn't sleep at all. My mind was a whirlwind of calculations, contingencies, potential pitfalls. I polished my old service revolver, a habit from my detective days, feeling the familiar weight of the cold steel in my hand. I knew I couldn't go in alone. I reached out to a few trusted retired officers, men who owed me their careers, who still believed in my unwavering sense of justice. Detective Ramirez with his sharp wit and even sharper aim. Sergeant Miller, a hulk of a man with a heart of gold and a loyalty forged in the crucible of countless dangerous operations. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. Just that I was on the verge of exposing a major art theft ring, the culmination of a decades-long pursuit, and that I needed backup. "It's big," I'd said, my voice low and urgent. "And it's dangerous. You in?" Without hesitation, they agreed. The old guard, reassembling for one last fight. I spent hours crafting a coded message, an old police idiom, a phrase only Harding would recognize, a distress signal disguised as a casual check-in. "The chess game's getting complicated, Harding. King's gambit, pawn's queen, keep an eye on the board." It was enough to tell him I was walking into something dangerous, that he needed to track my phone to be ready to move when I gave the signal. I laid out my old detective's kit, a miniature recording device, a burner phone, a small, discreet camera. Every tool, every contingency. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about redemption. For Imani, for the bottom, for the whispers of justice that had haunted me for decades. The stage was set. Tomorrow, the game truly began. The morning of the confrontation dawned with a deceptive calm. The sun, usually a welcome presence, felt like an interrogation lamp, shining too brightly, revealing too much. I meticulously prepared, moving through the rituals of my morning with a heightened sense of awareness. Each cup of coffee, each button on my shirt felt imbued with significance, part of the armor I was donning for battle. The usual half-smile was gone, replaced by a grim determination that tightened the muscles in my jaw. My heart, usually a steady drum, now beat a slightly faster rhythm, a nervous energy thrumming beneath my skin. As I made my way to Finch's gallery, the city felt different, sharper. Every face I passed, every honking car, every siren's wail seemed to carry a hidden message, a warning or an omen. I clutched the small, discreet recording device in my palm, its cold plastic a reassuring presence against my skin. This was it. The culmination of decades, the moment where I either secured Imani's freedom and dismantled the serpent, or I became another one of its silenced victims. The thought of failure was a bitter taste, a fear I pushed down with a force born of desperation. Imani's face, vibrant and hopeful in my mind's eye, was my shield. Finch's gallery was an oasis of hushed opulence, a stark contrast to the gritty vibrancy of the bottom. The heavy oak door swung open silently as I approached, as if anticipating my arrival. A young, impeccably dressed assistant greeted me, her smile as artificial as the flawless art on the walls. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Finch is expecting you." She led me through a maze of pristine corridors, past ancient tapestries and modern sculptures, the air thick with the scent of money and ambition. My eyes, however, scanned every detail, searching for hidden cameras, potential escape routes, weaknesses. This was not just an art gallery. It was a fortress, a gilded cage designed to impress and to entrap. Finally, we reached a back room, dimly lit, its atmosphere heavy with the weight of stolen history. It was a treasure trove, an extraordinary collection of illicit art, ancient artifacts, Renaissance paintings, contemporary masterpieces, all breathing silently in the subdued light. And there, seated behind a massive mahogany desk, a ghost from my past brought to chilling life, was Julian Finch, the collector. He was impeccably dressed, a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire shop. His silver hair neatly combed, his hands manicured and smooth, resting casually on the desk. He looked up as I entered, a predatory smile playing on his lips, those cold, calculating eyes fixing on me with an unsettling intensity. There was a smugness there, a casual confidence that spoke of absolute power. "Mr. Vance," Finch purred, his voice a smooth baritone that grated on my nerves. "I understand you've been quite busy lately. A shame about your granddaughter. Such a promising young artist." His words were a carefully aimed dart, designed to wound, to provoke. But I held my composure, the years of detective work, of facing down ruthless criminals serving me now. My voice when I spoke was calm, steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning within me. "She's innocent, Julian," I stated, my eyes locked on his. "And you know it. You planted that sculpture. You framed her to shut down her work, to keep your gentrification scheme moving without a spotlight on the bottom." Finch chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that grated against my ears. He leaned back in his chair, a king on his throne. "A petty nuisance, Mr. Vance. The sculpture was a bonus. We needed to send a message. Artists like her stir up trouble. They create sentiment, rally the weak. You, however, are a much older, more persistent nuisance. I thought I'd finally gotten rid of you after that police raid all those years ago. But you always did have a knack for the game, didn't you, detective?" The casual mention of the sabotaged raid, the lingering insult, struck a nerve. The bitterness of that failure, the one that had allowed him to escape, to continue his reign of terror, was still raw. But I couldn't let it show. This wasn't about my pride. It was about Imani. "It's not a game, Julian," I retorted, my voice hardening. "It's people's lives, and you've been playing with them for far too long." Finch's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He gestured casually with a hand, and from the shadows behind him a large, imposing figure stepped forward. A brute, built like an oak tree, with cold, vacant eyes. My heart gave a little skip. This was the enforcer, the muscle, the moment of truth. "I'm afraid your checkmate is overdue, old man," Finch said, a cold menace in his voice, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. The enforcer took another step forward, his shadow falling over me like a shroud. Just as the figure advanced, I made my move. I didn't fight. I didn't reach for the concealed revolver. I had anticipated this, planned for this exact moment. I pulled out my burner phone, its small screen already recording, and held it up, making sure it was visible, making sure my voice would be captured clearly. "Julian Finch, also known as the Collector," I spoke, my voice ringing out, clear and resonant in the hushed room. "You are under arrest for orchestrating a criminal enterprise, grand larceny, and framing Imani Vance for a crime you committed. I have proof of the original sculpture's serial number, the fake you used, and a witness." I looked pointedly at the large figure, whose initial advance had faltered, his eyes shifting nervously between Finch and me. "And I have your warehouse, full of stolen art, including the mask from the community center." Finch's composure shattered, his face contorted in rage, a mask of fury replacing his casual arrogance. "Witness? What witness?" he roared, his voice losing its silken edge, revealing the raw brutality beneath. Just then, as if on cue, the gallery's heavy front door burst open, slamming against the wall with a resounding thud. Detective Harding, flanked by a team of uniformed officers, swarmed in, their presence a sudden, overwhelming force in the quiet, illicit sanctuary. The calculated risk had paid off. My coded message, the old police idiom, had been received. Harding had tracked my phone, his instincts, honed under my mentorship, kicking in at the critical moment. The large enforcer, caught off guard, hesitated, his eyes darting wildly. I knew this man. I'd seen his type 100 times in my years on the force. A low-level enforcer, a hired hand, not a true believer in the Serpent's cause. He was motivated by money, not loyalty. "Remember your family, son," I said, my voice softer now, cutting through the sudden chaos. "Is this truly worth it? Losing everything for a man who cares nothing for you?" The enforcer, seeing his chance, seeing the walls close in, made his choice. He pointed a thick, trembling finger at Finch. "He paid me to plant the sculpture. He runs everything. Thorn, the warehouse, all of it. He's the collector." Finch roared, a primal sound of fury and betrayal. But it was too late. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled. The pieces of my chess game had fallen into place perfectly, irrevocably. Checkmate. The aftermath was a whirlwind of flashing lights, shouting officers, and the methodical dismantling of Finch's illicit empire. Harding and his team moved with precision, securing the stolen art, cataloging the evidence. Finch, his face a mask of furious disbelief, was cuffed and led away, still spewing threats and accusations, his carefully cultivated image of the refined art dealer shattered. The enforcer, now a terrified informant, was taken into protective custody. The evidence was overwhelming. My recorded confession from Finch, the enforcer's testimony, the photos of the fake sculpture with its missing serial number, the real sculpture found in Finch's hidden vault, and most damningly, the community center mask, proving the Syndicate's long history of exploitation. Word spread like wildfire through the bottom. The news channels, initially quick to condemn Imani, were now scrambling to cover the breaking story of the art syndicate's downfall and the astonishing role of an old pawnbroker. The headlines, once scathing, now lauded me as a hero, a modern-day Sherlock Holmes from the inner city. But all of that was background noise. My focus, my only concern, was Imani. She was released the next day. The moment she walked out of that courthouse, into the bright sunlight, was a moment etched forever in my memory. Her eyes, once dulled by despair, now sparkled with unshed tears of relief and joy. She ran into my arms, clinging to me, her body trembling with the release of weeks of terror. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You did it. You really did it." My own eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. I simply held her, inhaling the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her in my arms, a profound sense of peace washing over me. Her name was cleared. The shadow that had threatened to consume her artistic future, her very spirit, was gone. The true sculpture, the magnificent piece of African art, was recovered and returned to its rightful owners. More importantly, the intricately carved wooden mask, the one from the community center, was also returned. Its unveiling at a jubilant ceremony, attended by the entire neighborhood, was a powerful moment of healing. The community center, revitalized by donations and renewed hope, promised to restore it to its former glory. That mask wasn't just a piece of art. It was a symbol of their stolen heritage now reclaimed. It was a tangible victory against the forces that had sought to diminish them. Thorn, exposed as a key lieutenant in Finch's syndicate, vanished overnight, his properties seized, his reputation in tatters. The shell corporations were dissolved, and the insidious gentrification scheme that had threatened to erase the bottom was halted, its architects brought to justice. The city council launched an investigation into the police department's past handling of the case, and promises of reform echoed through the halls of power. Justice, long overdue, had finally been served in the bottom. Weeks later, life in the bottom began to regain its rhythm, but it was a new rhythm, infused with a renewed sense of hope and defiance. The whispers of fear had been replaced by a chorus of celebration. Imani, her spirit fully rekindled, found a new canvas for her art. I stood on my porch sipping a cup of coffee, the morning sun warm on my face, watching her. She was painting a new mural on the side of a community building, a vibrant, triumphant scene of their neighborhood. Children danced, elders laughed, musicians played, all rendered in Imani's signature bold, unapologetic strokes. It was a testament to resilience, to community, to the power of art to heal and to inspire. It was beautiful. In my hand I held a single chess piece, a knight. The piece I'd often used to symbolize unexpected moves, daring strategies. I had risked everything, played my most dangerous game, laid my life on the line. But my granddaughter was safe, her future bright. And justice, true justice, had finally, undeniably, triumphed in the bottom. The pawn shop still hummed with life, a constant, comforting presence. But now, within its walls, and throughout the entire neighborhood resonated a renewed sense of hope, a testament to an old man who knew how to play the long game. The victory against the serpent wasn't just mine, it was the bottom's. It was a testament to what happens when you underestimate an old man, when you mistake quiet observation for weakness. Finch and his ilk believed they were untouchable, that their money and connections shielded them. But they forgot the power of history, the strength of a community, and the unwavering love of a grandfather. Imani's art now flourished, a beacon of hope and a vibrant reminder that the bottom would not be silenced, would not be erased. And me? I still sit behind my counter at Vance's Valuables, the half-smile back on my lips, my eyes still missing nothing. I listen to the whispers of the past, but now I also hear the triumphant roar of a future reclaimed. The game might be over, but the lessons endure. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of hope or a surge of satisfaction, then please, give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story of justice being served. And subscribe to join our community, where we believe that, even in the darkest of times, the long game of truth and resilience always, eventually, wins. What's your take on playing the long game for justice? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, some battles are fought in the shadows, but victory always brings the light.